It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Hello, this is Dr. Justin Coulson. It's so good to have you joining us for the Happy Families podcast, Doctor's Desk edition. I'm here with Kylie, my wife, mum to our 6 kids, and we're going to talk science today. The latest research, the latest evidence, the stuff that's going to make your family thrive, function better based on what researchers have been discovering around the world. 3 studies today, Kylie, to get into. Where do we start?
Well, we have one on weight stigma and what a UK parliamentary inquiry back in 2022 discovered in relation to our teens. We're going to talk about how a baby's cry might not tell us anything. And we're also going to look into the secret to getting your teen to listen to you.
Okay, all right. I like the sound of a couple of those. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with weight stigma. I think this is interesting.
All right. So you've highlighted both some research and this 2022 parliamentary inquiry. Let's start with the parliamentary inquiry and then go from there. If you're raising kids who don't feel good about their weight, this is really what we're talking about here. Weight stigma is that feeling like my weight, the way that I look is problematic. I'm feeling pressure. I don't like who I am because of my weight. I feel like I'm less worthy because of my weight. That's what weight stigma is. And in 2024, I think that it's as strong, if not stronger than it has ever been. Obesity UK is an organisation, obviously in England, that told a UK parliamentary inquiry that based on their research, they've found that people who are struggling with weight stigma are more likely to experience depression and anxiety and compromised psychosocial well-being. And they could also experience a delay or even avoidance in adopting healthier habits. Plus, regardless of what they weigh, increased risk of mortality. Weight stigma is just terrible for kids, adults, whoever, in terms of their psychological and their physiological outcomes.
So how does someone develop weight stigma?
Well, this is what these researchers looked at. They were from the University of Bristol, and they got a whole bunch of 13-year-olds. We're going back years now. This has been a longitudinal study. It was done prospectively. It's really, really well designed. So they've got a bunch of 13-year-olds. They've asked them about the pressure that they feel from family members and friends and from the media to lose a few kilos. And they've endured weight-based teasing throughout their lives. They were followed up 18 years later at the age of 31. Like, this is a really, really clever study. These are very patient researchers. They've waited 18 years to get this data. And effectively what they've found is that internalized weight stigma caused people to feel like they're less attractive, feel like they're less competent. By the way, there's other research that highlights that we as a society tend to look at people who have gained weight and who are carrying what we would look at as being, if they're overweight or obese, that is, they're carrying excessive weight. There's a general human response to attribute to those people a sense of incompetence. That is, if you can't keep your weight off, people think that you're less competent than you are. It's an absolutely tragic mindset, and it's absolutely pervasive. So this publication, published in the Lancet Regional Health Europe Journal, basically found that if you're carrying weight stigma, let me say that again, if you're carrying weight stigma, not carrying weight, but carrying weight stigma, you therefore think that people are judging you as less attractive, less competent, or less valuable as a person, even if you're not obese. In fact, even if you're underweight. It's linked to eating disorders, an increased drive for thinness. And the research basically found a strong and lasting effect on adult psychological health caused by pressure from parents to lose weight, as well as bullies and the media. It's just a devastating finding.
So what can we do as parents to help our children navigate the challenges that come from a society that is so focused on physical appearance to help our children?
It's such a tricky one because if you are a parent raising a child who is struggling, like they might even come to you and say, I don't like how I look, I'm not happy with my weight. Or if you're looking at a child and going, oh gosh, if we could just get you to move a bit more or eat a little bit better, then you would feel better about yourself. The rule is, and it's really hard to keep this rule, but the rule is that you don't say stuff to your kids about it because that will create that internalized weight stigma in almost every case. There's research for decades now that highlights this. What we've got to do really as the parents is encourage healthy eating by making sure that good food is around and encourage exercise, not by telling the kids to do it, but by just going and doing it, incorporating healthy eating and physical activity and movement into your life and having your children join you while you're moving and like being involved, that's kind of it. It's really, oh gosh, it's such a hard one. It's such a really, really tough one. I remember being on the Today Show years ago and we were having a conversation like this and Carl Stefanovic said, but if your child's overweight, if your child's fat, surely you need to let them know that they've got to do something about it. And my response was, Carl, if they're fat, they know it. Like they don't need you to tell them. What really needs to happen, and this is the hardest part of all, right? Because we all live such busy lives. But what really needs to happen is that we get out of the house, we go for bike rides, we go for walks, we go to the park, we go to the beach, we go hiking in the bush, we do stuff that gets bodies moving, and we keep the garbage out of the diet. We eat well. That is study number 1. We will link to it in the show notes. It's a fascinating one and such an important one. Let's look at study number 2.
Intriguing. A baby's cry doesn't tell us what we thought it might.
Yeah, this one really captured my attention and, I think it's fascinating. Some researchers in France, Marguerite Lockhart-Bouron is the name of the lead researcher here, did this really, really interesting study. You know how people say, oh, that sounds like it's a tired cry, or that sounds like it's a hungry cry, or that sounds like it's a nappy change cry. My mum does this all the time, Kylie. My mum can read babies. She's convinced of it. But the researchers basically found that they recorded a whole lot of babies crying over a 48-hour period. Every time that baby cried, they documented it, the whole thing from start to finish. The recording was just going. Then they trained AI and they trained a bunch of people on 10 different elements of what the cry could sound like, 10 acoustic variables. They got the AI to try to identify which cry was for which reason, because the parents were keeping a journal as to what pacified the crying once they'd tried to figure out what was going on with the child. And Kylie, the AI couldn't figure it out. Neither could the people who had been trained to listen to the cries. It was not possible. Nobody knew why the baby was crying.
I remember when our children were young and we were in the midst of growing our family, I had friends who would talk to me about the fact that there were different cries and I just needed to listen. I actually had one friend say to me, what's your baby crying about? Like, do you know what that cry is? Like, they're just crying.
Yeah, they might be hungry or they might be tired or they might be in a nappy change, and we'll figure it out as we go through the process of elimination. Based on the timing and when they had a last food, I reckon it might be hunger.
Priscilla Dunstan wrote a book called Calm the Crying, using the Dunstan baby language. And she teaches you the different sounds that babies make and what those sounds actually mean.
Okay, well, I'm so sorry, Ms. Dunstan, but based on this brand new research, if somebody tried to sell me your book, I would hold on to my wallet and run, because it seems that the evidence does not support what's in there. In fact, the team did write. They said, and I'm quoting here, some non-academic sources even suggest that babies' cries are a language made up of phonemes whose meaning can be learned. So I think they're really talking about that. And then they basically say there's a lack of fundamental scientific evidence to support their veracity. We've got phone apps that promise to translate cries these days. They're becoming increasingly popular. Evidence isn't there to support it. If the baby's crying, you pick it up, you give it a hug, you check the nappy, you try and feed them. Sometimes babies just cry. And as you go through that process of elimination, you usually get there. Incidentally, the team did find that the people who were best able to identify what the cry was about was the parent of the child. And it was because they could say, it's been that long since they were fed, or, yeah, I can smell a really bad odor in the room. I think that's the problem. It's got nothing to do with the noise the baby makes. The baby's upset. Go and look after the baby. Full stop. End of story. That's the science. Study number 3.
Every parent of a teenager is waiting with bated breath for the answer to the secrets to getting your teen to listen to you.
I love this one. So this is a brand new study that's been published in a journal called Emerging Adulthood. University of California, Riverside researchers asked a bunch of young people how they work through their emotional problems with the help of other people specifically. And they got about 200 kids. Well, I say 200 kids. They were undergraduate psychology students to basically write a short, open-ended page of material about the most recent time that they had to receive emotional support from their parents and the way that their parent got involved. And reading through this study, Kylie, it felt as though all of these undergraduate psychology students had read my book. It felt like they just knew, or maybe their parents knew. I don't know. What they basically found was that autonomy support is the central thing that determines whether or not teenagers are willing to listen to you. They found that when young people actively sought advice, they were much more likely to believe that they were getting responsive, caring, validating support from their parents. And they also felt that their parents gave them better quality advice. They found that unsolicited advice was not effective, but ultimately how well all of it landed, whether it was unsolicited or consensually given, pretty much came down to how much autonomy parents offered. When parents offered high levels of autonomy, advice was much more likely to be taken on board. And this is the foundation of what I teach parents. If you want to talk to your kids about hard stuff when they're in their teens, first thing you want to do is say, hey, I've got an idea. Would you be open to hearing it? Or do you prefer to solve this one on your own? Simply by asking, by getting their consent, that's an autonomy supportive way of engaging. And then your kids have to think, do I really want to hear from my parents on this one? And if they say yes, then they're open to it. They're actively now seeking your advice. And then at the end of it, you say, well, that's one option. Can you think of any others? And then you're giving them that support, that autonomy support where they go, my parents not telling me what to do. They're using their hard-won wisdom for their multiple decades of life that they've been alive much longer than me to give me some guidance, but they're still leaving it up to me. And that's when the kids went, yeah, I like this. It's genuine. It's transparent, it's truthful, but I still get to decide.
So the secret is really...
Read The Parenting Revolution by Dr. Justin Coulson. Is that what you're going to say? That's not what you're going to say. I can't believe you weren't going to say that. I'm looking at your eyes and you're like, you just talked over me and it's not even what I was going to say. Sorry, I should have said, can I have your consent to interrupt you so that I can share what I think you... I'm so sorry. What's the secret, Kylie?
Read The Parenting Revolution.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that felt so genuine as well.
With 5 of our 6 children having gone through or are still going through
their teen years,
we've had plenty of time to practice
and
learn from our mistakes. And I think that what I have loved as each of our children have got to this stage is getting to that place where we can have these open conversations and dialogue where they are willing to participate in exploration, getting curious about the possible solutions to whatever they're going through in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. We will link to all of these studies in our show notes for those of you who are academically inclined and would like to get a little bit more information about whether or not we can really communicate effectively with our teenagers, whether or not we really can or cannot understand what our kids are saying when they're infants and they're having a big cry, and especially that one about teasing kids about their weight and helping them to have a healthy approach to the way their body looks, recognizing that their value is not related to how they look. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer, and if you'd like more info about making your family happier, we'd love for you to visit us at happyfamilies.com.au.